Hello, hello. Welcome back to the show. Nicole Holland here. Super excited to have you with us. And I'm super excited to also have my friend Tim Francis with us for a very special masterclass today. Let me first give you an introduction to Tim, and then we're going to get into the nitty gritty. So have those pens and paper handy. So, Tim Francis is the founder of Great Assistant, which helps entrepreneurs get a great assistant. For 5 years, he failed again and again with assistants, and then he finally cracked the code. His current assistant now handles 95% of his email inbox and has allowed Tim to focus on bigger opportunities. Tim has since appeared on Inc.com, is a regular contributor to Forbes, and has been a guest lecturer at NYU in New York City. And I've been working with Tim since the beginning of the year, and we're recording this in 2018. Not sure when you're listening, but since the beginning of 2018, and it's just been such an honor and a privilege and a pleasure to have Tim and his team as a part of my team. So I'm really excited for him to be able to speak with you today about one of the biggest struggles that we face as entrepreneurs and business owners, and that is hiring. So welcome, Tim.
So great to be here.
Awesome. All right. So what are we going to talk about in the masterclass today? What's my audience going to learn by the end of our time together?
Today, we're going to talk about the 3 parts to getting a great assistant. Those 3 parts are vision, so that your assistant can become wildly profitable for you. The second part is delegate. So seeing what it is that we can delegate and learning how to do that. And thirdly is hire. And the third part really dives into what are the best practices that we found have worked. We've hired close to 200 assistants, and there's definitely some patterns in there. So by the end of the masterclass, you should have covered all 3 of those, and everyone should feel a lot closer to getting their very own great assistant.
Fantastic. So, this is very, very flexible, and you really are the master at this. So did you have slides you wanted to start with, or do we want to just start talking about the foundations?
Yeah, I'm happy to go either way. If it's a conversation for us to flexibly have, I'm good with that. Or if you'd like me to dive into a few slides, I'm happy to do that too.
Yeah, so then let's just start out conversationally. And for my listeners who are catching us on the podcast, we are going to do some slide share. So when you are not driving, not doing anything, operating heavy machinery, come on over to the Nicole Holland Show, and you can see the video of this interview, and you'll see all of the slides and things that Tim does speak about throughout the conversation. But yeah, so tell me about first of all, why is it so flippin' hard for us to have a great assistant? Because we all know there's amazing people out there. And I think when we start out looking for team members, we really will like somebody. We'll think, oh, they get us, right? There's a good connection, good gel. Oh, everything on their resume ticks the boxes. They've got the skills. Fantastic. Why is it most people, I believe it's most people, fail at having a long-term relationship with their first assistant or early assistants?
You know, it's interesting. I think that as entrepreneurs, we can beat ourselves up if we don't get it right the first time or the second time or the third time, whatever it may be, but there's something in marketing or sales or getting an assistant. And first of all, just for like a little bit of healing for all of us, is just that even in the corporate world, even in the world of professional managers who have their business degrees and whatnot, the hiring success rate for hourly workers nationwide in the United States, and the same phenomenon is true in Canada, and I would guess in most countries, the hiring success rate is actually less than 50%. So, and that includes people who are professional HR people, people that don't have to worry about marketing, don't have to worry about sales or bookkeeping or accounting or any of that, and they just get to think about that all day. So I think, first of all, just some healing that you're not broken. It's just a matter of picking up a few skills. Along the way, we've installed a number of different practices when it comes to hiring assistants, and our stick rate currently is at 85%. So the way we measure that is that after those all crucial 3 months, the first 3 months, what percentage of assistants are sticking with their entrepreneur? So part of why it's so hard is because it's hard to find an assistant. Secondly is it can be hard to know what to delegate and how to delegate. And the third is actually our leadership. And, part of it is also related to the kind of assistant that we're looking for in the first place, because not all assistants are created equal. A quick story, true story. My very first ever assistant I got from India. I just read the 4-Hour Work Week, and it seemed like getting some from India was like a great idea. And she was actually a really, really pleasant, talented, smart person, great English, and I thought I was good to go. And I was astounded to discover once I hired her that no, there was not a bank machine in the sky pouring money on me. Like I thought it was just, I was going to get rich and famous. It's all going to be perfect, right? Which is already sounds ridiculous, but I thought it was the answer. So I was shocked to discover a few things. Number one, because she was in India, I didn't realize that there were certain third world kind of considerations that came along with that. So the relationship ended after a particular incident where there was some corruption and a political disagreement, and literally one politician had the electricity turned off to another politician's neighborhood, and that neighborhood happened to be where my assistant was living. And it dawned on me, oh my goodness, I'm depending on my assistant, and my assistant's depending on the infrastructure of what India is. And so I was really, that really opened my eyes and made me realize that, if I'm gonna play for real, if I'm not gonna kind of no more half measures here, then I want an assistant who's similar, same time zone, similar, same culture, and same first language. And I get it. I totally get, because I've had assistants in the Philippines and Pakistan and Jamaica and India and Iran and all, like it's unbelievable the number of different countries you can get an assistant from. And I've paid $4 an hour in the Philippines, and I've paid $100 an hour for a specialist, in the United States, and in that whole wide range, the greatest value I found to be a great assistant is paying about $17 to $20 an hour in the United States or Canada. Now, certainly, there's folks that make the $4 an hour assistants in the Philippines work, and great. Oftentimes though, you'll find that it's very repeated tasks like photo editing or data entry, like something that doesn't require a lot of decision making. If you've got a simple SOP or process that you want people to follow, then, and it's rinse, wash, repeat over and over and over and over. And it's a very, there's very little variation or deviation. Overseas can be a great option, particularly if you don't need access to them within a few hours, because the time zone can just can drive a person insane, honestly. If you're trying to get a project done, but you can't reach out and get a reply within 3 to 4 hours because they're sleeping, because that's what humans do, is they sleep. It's like, so I think that's the very first thing, is what kind of assistant are we after in the first place? The second thing is, so we surveyed 149 entrepreneurs, and we asked them this one question. We said, what's your number one frustration or challenge in getting a great assistant? And I thought there was going to be dozens of different reasons, when in fact there were just 6 that came up for 98.7% of entrepreneurs. And those issues included, number one, and this probably comes as no surprise to you, Nicole, or most people listening, the number one frustration or challenge was letting go of control and or trusting. The second, and this was a distant second, was the money part. Was I don't know what I should pay. I don't know how to make them profitable. And so of the big 6 concerns, they were trust and control, money. I don't have the time to train. I don't have the time to manage or fix mistakes. I don't know where to find them. I don't know what to delegate. Those 6 issues were the big 6. So as we started discovering how a North American assistant would really solve a lot of problems, then as I was getting into that through my first 5 years of hiring, I started realizing that actually how much I was a bottleneck. Like if I wasn't willing to meet with my assistant at least once a week just to be in touch and to follow a regular kind of meeting rhythm, like, it was amazing how fast my assistant would just kind of like drift off and we'd fall out of touch. Projects wouldn't get done. I realized that I was doing a very poor job of creating a vision of like, hey, first we're going to take this block of the business and we're going to sort that out. And we're going to get that delegated. Then it's the next block. And actually, Nicole, I think you've done a really cool job in your business with the great assistants you've acquired through us to say like, here's like this section of my business, whether that's coordinating guests or whether that's, a different section is like how to actually produce the show. And all of that comes together to create a vision of here's the next chunk that needs to be delegated. Oftentimes entrepreneurs will get themselves into the place of, I need some help, so I'm going to jump on Facebook. And I'm just going to say, hey, who knows someone who's a great assistant? Or who's got a sister-in-law who needs some hours? And so then they hire someone who is recommended off of Facebook. Then after that, they'll hire first, then they'll delegate a few things. The assistant gets good at those few things if it's a good hire. And then after that, the assistant says, okay, what's next? And the entrepreneur goes, oh, shoot. I don't know, take my email inbox. And it's just like this overwhelming amount of work. And then after that, the assistant either gets frustrated or the assistant doesn't hear from the entrepreneur regularly. And all of a sudden it just drifts apart. There's no work to be done and the relationship ends. So that's why I encourage all entrepreneurs to flip it around. And instead of hiring someone first and then figuring out delegating, and then after that, coming up with the vision, is to flip it around 180 degrees and say, let's start with the vision of where are we going, what needs to be delegated, what's the big picture, what are the chunks of the business I can get off my plate, then figure out the specifics of what to delegate, and then and only then move into the realm of actually hiring and finding the right person to fit that. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And that's fantastic. Thank you for that overview. So I'm guessing then that what you're explaining is really the vision, having that clear understanding of where you're going, what you want them to do, and is part of it also how you want them to do it? Or is there anything else you want to share about that vision piece?
Yeah, absolutely. So to me, vision is really, vision is part of it is expectations. And part of it is just kind of understanding how that assistant clicks into your world. So for me, I used to think of an assistant as kind of like a robot and someone who would just kind of like do the things that I didn't want to do. And I'm just going to throw things at them. And for me, when like everything changed when I had an illness back in 2010. And I actually, there's a lot of bad things that had happened in my business. I lost a ton of money. The real estate market corrected. I was down over $100,000 in debt. And the idea of hiring an assistant was terrifying. I was like, I don't have the money to hire them. I wouldn't even know what to delegate first. I don't know how to let go of control. A lot of that exact same list that I shared with you earlier. And then I realized that actually, you know what, there's no, of course, an assistant is a cost, but my relationship with my assistant needs to be a profit center. Even though I'm putting $1 in wages out, I need to get $10 back. I might put an hour of work into training them. I need to get 10 hours back, right? And to understand that in the very beginning, we're actually worse off when we get an assistant because of the time that we need to train them and onboard them and all the rest. So to understand that from a vision perspective, that your assistant is actually a long-term asset. If you ask yourself, what would have to be true for the next assistant that I hire to stick with me for 3 years? And I'm not saying that you have to sign a contract with them, that it's going to take 3 years or that you're going to be together for 3 years, but that spirit of this next person I'm hiring, I'm not just kind of one toe in the water, maybe not. Like, I want to hire someone. I want to be thorough about it because I got to stick with them for 3 years. I'm excited to train them. I'm excited to meet with them every single week because every week that I do that and the more that I put into training them, truly the compound interest will add up so quickly. And within 3 to 6 months, we've hit a break-even point. Within a year, they're now hitting some of my very lofty expectations. Within a couple years, they're so far beyond doing things that I ever thought imaginable. It's super, super powerful. So I think that that's part of the vision that I'm talking about. I think vision also includes understanding that, when an entrepreneur starts a business, they're actually starting an entity that's outside of themselves. Starting a business is oftentimes something that's very personal, and we think of it almost as our own baby. But here's the thing, even a baby is a separate entity from the mom or the dad. And the thing is sometimes that baby screams in the middle of the night and we don't really feel like doing it to wake up. And we wake up because that's the call of duty. So we'll be there. So likewise for an entrepreneur, like I get it. There's things that we just hate doing, right? There's bookkeeping and there's accounting, there's operations, there's admin stuff. And just because we hate doing it doesn't mean that we're allowed to not do it. And so I think that a huge part of it is, in terms of vision, is understanding that for us to actually get into our own business, we need to actually embrace even those parts that are not as sexy, not as fun. And a lot of the breakthrough entrepreneurs that I see, what their pattern is, instead of saying, I'm going to see an opportunity and I'm going to solve a problem and I'm going to start something new, the struggling entrepreneurs, they'll do that, they'll figure it out, but then they're on to the next thing. On to the next thing, on to the next thing, on to the next thing. And the true progress that they actually make over time, sometimes they're kind of disappointed. Whereas a breakthrough entrepreneur will see, oh my goodness, okay, here's a winning strategy, product, campaign, whatever, market, whatever that might be. And then from there, they'll actually double back and figure out, okay, now what can I delegate to my assistant or my team, or if you're working with an outside agency or whatever. And once that's delegated, then they go find the next big thing. And it allows for there to actually be like a capturing and a winning, like a winning formula that you get to just rinse, wash, repeat again and again and again, rather than winning and then abandoning, winning and then abandoning, winning and then abandoning. So I think that's a big part of the vision too, is how do we get that kind of yin and yang of starting things, which is the entrepreneur's job, and then handing it off to an assistant who can continue things for us, so that can keep cranking profit and impact and all the things that we're striving for. That's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about vision.
Copy. Love it. So what are some of the things that we can ask ourselves? Like, what are some tangible takeaways here to help my listeners design their vision? So I think a lot of people understand what you're saying, but are there any specific questions or specific things that we can do to put ourselves in a better position to be hiring later on?
Yeah, the North Star, and certainly in our next two sections here in Delegate and Hire, we're going to get into a lot of very tangible tools and tactics. In terms of vision, the question I encourage everyone to have in their head and on their heart as they're hiring is, what would have to be true if the next person that I hired, I made a 3-year commitment to them? And again, I'm not saying you got to make a 3-year contractual legal commitment. I just mean kind of in your head and your heart. And I think you'll suddenly start looking at the hiring process very, very differently. Rather than just hiring the first person who's recommended you on Facebook, you're probably going to go, I'm going to look at a few more people, right? And in fact, and we'll talk about this in the hire section, when we're looking at getting an assistant, we're actually looking at 50 to 100 different candidates to find one winning great assistant. And that's because we're expecting every person that we hire to be around, not for 3 days or 3 months, but like measured in years. That's what we're really going for.
Great. Awesome. Okay. So do you want to move on then to the delegate section?
Let's definitely do that. Yeah, absolutely. Right. Yeah. So once we got kind of our vision, I think the next North Star to think about is, so this is in the delegate part. So we've talked about vision, we're now into part 2, which is delegate. And delegate is so much about how do we identify the proper task to delegate first and next and what's after that and what's after that. And one of the best analogies I've ever kind of come up with to represent how this works is the analogy of a surgeon. So if we just said surgery was one really big project, which it is, and we just left it at that, it would actually be impossible to delegate any part of it. Thankfully, the medical community has taken this big thing called surgery and has unpacked it into all the sub pieces. There's probably like 200 steps that go into surgery. There needs to be an initial diagnosis. We need to look at x-rays. We need to prepare the room. We need to book all the nurses to be there. We need to get all the tools ready, the fluids, on and on. Like it just goes, in the United States, there's a billing component. It's like really, really, really quite a complicated process. Because it's been unpacked into the sub pieces, though, we can say, oh, the billing part, that goes to the administrator. The cleaning part goes to the caretaker or janitor. Getting the patient into a gown, that's the nurse, right? And as we unpack that, we start to realize there's kind of different hierarchy or different categories or buckets of tasks. And the three that I really, really want everyone to pay attention to is, what is the strategy, what is the high-level skill, and what is the high-level access? And that's what I want you as an entrepreneur to focus on, just as we want the surgeon to focus on that. You are the surgeon of your operating room, and your operating room is your business. So taking the surgeon situation, the strategy parts of that would be meeting with the patient in the first place to prepare a diagnosis and to also figure out which surgery we're doing and what's our approach. There would also be some strategy involved after the surgery is done to take a look at how things are happening in recovery, right? And that's kind of it. That's the surgery strategy part. The surgery high-level skill part is going to be actually performing the surgery itself. Then the high-level access part of surgery would be how the surgeon is the only person with the right medical license to be able to sign off on certain pieces of paper. The surgeon's also going to have high-level access to other surgeons in case the surgeon needs a second opinion or something like that. If the junior nurse is trying to call a heart surgeon at a different hospital for a second opinion, the likelihood of that call being returned is far, far, far lower. Whereas if it's the surgeon calling the surgeon, all of a sudden now there's that high-level access to each other. Just like when Nicole Holland says, Tim Francis, will you be on my podcast? Tim Francis says yes, right? So there's a lot of parallels to business, yeah. So as we take that over, those three categories, we've got strategy, high-level skill, high-level access. If we take that over to a business example, we could take something like email marketing, right? When we send an email to all of our followers, all of our customers to promote a new product or offering. Or maybe it's just to share some wisdom or inspiration with our audience. And if you think about that, there's maybe 6 or 7 steps, right? We need to figure out what are we going to send, when are we going to send it, and who's going to receive it. Then from there, we got to actually write the copy, write the words that are going to go out. Then we got to upload it, we got to test it, and we're off to the races. So if we start looking at that, what's the strategy piece? The strategy piece is, what are we sending, who are we sending it to, when are we going to send it? That takes sometimes as little as 5 to 10 minutes. The next part, actually writing the email, that's maybe about half an hour, something like that. And that's the high-level skill part. Then from there, we draw this delegation line, just like the surgeon would. And because we're done with high-level skill, high-level strategy, strategy, high-level skill, and high-level access, everything else now should be done by everyone else. So once you've written that email, let's hand that off now to an assistant. They're the one who's going to open up Aweber, Constant Contact, MailChimp, Infusionsoft, whatever it is that you're using. And they're the one who's going to fight with the editor to make sure that the right bolded things get bolded, and we select the right list of people to receive it, and going to send a test email to ourselves, make sure click all the links, make sure it's all going to the right destination web pages and all the rest. All of that can be done by someone else, and it should be done by someone else. And part of why I use this example is this seems like such a basic, it doesn't seem heroic to hand off to your assistant. Can you set up this email broadcast? That seems so humble. And yet, when we start unpacking it, we realize that the strategy, high-level skill, high-level access, which is your part, that's maybe 35 to 50 minutes. And we start realizing if you're to actually stopwatch how long it takes you to go and open up your email service and upload the content and format the email and send the test, it is astounding how fast that can also be 20 to 30 to 35 minutes. And as entrepreneurs, we oftentimes die death by 1,000 paper cuts. 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there, 20 minutes here. And it is astounding how fast that adds up. So as far as the specific takeaway, is I encourage you as an entrepreneur to do a few things. Number one is to actually keep a time log or a time journal. It's incredibly simple to do. Like we're talking, this can be paper and pen. We don't need a special app or anything like that. And from there is to just notice every 15 minutes, maybe put a little buzzer on your phone or something to remind you to like, what am I doing right now? And I would say probably like 99 to 100% of all entrepreneurs that do a little time tracking, even if it's just for 2 or 3 days, are astounded, truly astounded at how they actually spend their time. And once you've got that list of all the tasks that you've been doing, is then take a pen and just put a D next to any task that you're like, you know what, actually I could delegate that. And ideally it's going to be a task that's simple to teach, simple for your system to learn. The task, when it's repeated once, takes less than half an hour to do. It's something that doesn't require a high level of technical proficiency, like, it'll be a $15 to $20 an hour type task. It's something that ideally, if there was a mistake, would not sink your company, right? And you can even put a step in there that you get to double check the work before it goes live, right? So and one of the biggest features of all, when you're looking at your time study, is what tasks are showing up again and again and again. It doesn't make any sense at all to delegate a task that happens once a year. If your assistant is new, we need stuff that's happening like once a week, or maybe even 2 or 3 times a week. Maybe there's invoices that you're sending to customers and that's happening 4, 5, 6 times a week. Maybe you're sending 2 to 3 email broadcasts. Maybe you're uploading a podcast episode every single week. Whatever it is, when you can find the things that repeat, even if it's a 10-minute task, now it makes all the sense in the world to take 30 to 60 minutes to teach someone how to do a 10-minute task, because it's happening 3 times a week and 12 times a month and 150 times a year. And now all of a sudden you're getting that leverage of being able to put an hour in and get a ton of time back. And I think also within this exercise, the surgeon analogy, high-level skill, high-level access, and strategy is seeing what are those highest level tasks that I'm doing and how can I now go do more of them. On my path, when I was first getting started, so after doing it wrong for 5 years, then since then I've been doing it right for about 6 years. So it's been an 11-year journey here of working with assistants. And in my case, it was a very simple example because at the time I was a marketing consultant when Sarah first started working with me. If you're not a marketing consultant, that's fine. If you're not a consultant of any kind, if you've got a physical product or something like that, that's absolutely fine. This example still holds. So I was noticing that my clients were paying me $40 an hour. And I realized as I was trying to figure out how to afford Sarah, that there were a number of marketing projects that I wasn't getting around to doing for my clients. And that probably if I just approached them and said, hey, we're doing Google AdWords for you, or we're doing some kind of pay-per-click. Could we also do your website? Because I think we did this, or even just a landing page, right? And those clients said yes. The clients that were already doing paid ads and landing pages, I said, could we do an email sequence? And they said yes. And the clients who were doing all 3 of those for us said, can we do tracking, right? And so I just came up with what the next logical step was for 3 of my clients. I went to them and they said, oh yeah, that sounds great. I mean, you're doing great work for us already. Let's just do more. And guess what? I just created more $40 an hour work for myself, which then made it super easy for me to then turn around and go to Sarah and say, hey, I'd like to hire you for an extra 5 hours a week or an extra 20 hours this month or something like that. An example from the world of products, one of our clients who we took through our Great Assistant process, he heard a presentation that I gave about how to get a great assistant. And when he heard, that getting a great assistant oftentimes involves 50 to 100 applicants and like this whole process, which we're going to talk about today in just a few minutes, he went, it looks like too much work. I'm just going to do the Facebook route. And so he posted something up on Facebook and he, the first person who replied, he hired that person. And lo and behold, within a few weeks, it fell apart and it just didn't work. So he went, I'm just going to go back and do it all myself. I don't want the frustration of having to hire someone else. So in total, for 6 months went by and he never did get a great assistant. At the end of those first 6 months, he finally said, no, I'm frustrated. I don't like the work I'm doing. I need to get back to getting an assistant. So he contacted us again. He actually became a client of ours. It took about 6 months for his assistant to be hired, onboarded, trained, and really getting a lot of the momentum that I've been describing, to take a lot of the non-surgeon work off of his plate. And another really great example from the world of products is actually one of our clients. His name is Jimmy. And Jimmy saw a presentation I gave on how to get a great assistant. Another really great example, this one is from the world of products, not consulting, is one of our clients. His name is Jimmy. And so Jimmy heard a presentation that I gave on how to get a great assistant. He heard my recommendation that folks should probably be looking at 50 to 100 candidates before they make their final selection. And like most entrepreneurs, he said, that sounds like too much work. And lo and behold, the next day, Jimmy went onto Facebook and he simply posted, hey, does anyone know anyone who's looking for work as an assistant? He ended up hiring the first person who contacted him, and he was really excited. The assistant was really excited for the first couple of weeks. Lo and behold, it didn't work out. So Jimmy said, forget this. I'm just going to go back to doing this all myself. Getting an assistant is just too much of a hassle. So he did. And so for about a total of 6 months, he went with no assistant. And at the end of those 6 months, it dawned on him that he was really missing out, that there was a product that he'd always wanted to launch. And it had been 5 or 6 years. He knew of this product he wanted to launch, but he was just never, ever, ever going to get around to it as long as he was trying to do everything himself. So he contacted me and he said, you know what, Tim, I saw your presentation 6 months ago. I did exactly what you said not to do. I hired the first person I found off of Facebook. And I hate to say it, but it didn't work out. And I said, it's okay. It's okay. Like, no stress, no shame. Like, it's all good. So he ended up getting a great assistant, spent about 6 months training, onboarding, really doing a great job. He did just a fantastic job with all the kinds of suggestions that I've given today to be a great leader and a great teacher and a great coach to his assistant. And wouldn't you know it, at the end of those 6 months, not only did he have a great assistant, but he actually had freed up enough time that lo and behold, he launched that product that he'd wanted to for 5 or 6 years. So the first 6 months didn't go so hot. The middle 6 months totally turned a corner. And in the 6 months after that, Nicole, no kidding, he generated an extra $250,000 of revenue off of that new product that he launched. So us as entrepreneurs, sometimes we get really deep in our businesses and we just see that like an assistant is just a cost, right? For $17, $18, $19, $20 an hour. And sometimes that clouds our vision around what to delegate. And we stop seeing how the relationship that we have with our assistant and what we delegate to them is actually a profit center. Whether it's a consulting situation or a product, what is the opportunity cost of what we're missing out on by not having an assistant?
Fantastic. I love it. And for folks who are watching the video, I just want to let everybody know that as we're recording, a fire alarm's gone off a few times, so we've had to take some funny breaks. Hopefully my audio editor is editing this whole part out as I'm speaking right now so that my listeners don't need to hear that. But for those of you guys watching, laugh with us because we've been laughing like crazy for the last 20 minutes. So thank you so much, Tim. That was great. And so now let's jump into hire. Yeah. This is the perfect spot. So we've covered the first part, which is vision, the second part, which is delegate. Now we've got a good sense of, hey, here's the vision of how our assistant fits into our life moving forward. We got a sense of, I'm the surgeon. I'm going to look for high level skill. I'm going to look for high level access and strategy work. I'm going to then figure out everything else I want to delegate. Of the items I've delegated, I'm going to start with the tasks that repeat often, all those different characteristics I mentioned. And so now we're kind of ready, right? We've probably got 3, 4, 5 tasks that we've got our eye on. And it's time to start transitioning into actually getting the assistant. So the first part of that transition is to actually use a tool called 360 delegation. So once we've identified those first 3 to 5 tasks, is to use 360 delegation, which is a tool I invented, and it's simply communicating to your assistant what is the vision, the resources, and the definition of done,
of what it is that I want to get done. Vision includes things like, what's the timeline? When are we getting started? Are there important milestones along the way? Why are we doing this? What's the end goal? Resources includes items like, is there a username and password that is needed? Is there money that's required? Is there certain skills you need to learn? Are there other experts we need to go and hire? Do we need to translate something? Like some of our Amazon seller clients, they're dealing with China all the time and they need translators, right? So whatever the resources are required to be successful, that's the second part of 360 delegation. And then the third and final part is what's called definition of done. How do we know that this is complete? Do we need to sign off from the owner, from you? Do we need to sign off from a client? Are we going to store the finished work somewhere? Sometimes if we have a logo that we need to go back to many times, it's really helpful if we can store it in a predictable place so we can go back and edit it and access it when needed. So I have a complete list of all the different resources and a link if someone wants more information on 360 delegation. If they head over to greatassistant.com/toolbox, and on that page, there's not only a link to 360 delegation, but there's also a PDF you can download. It's called 104 Tasks You Can Delegate to an Assistant. So that helps to inspire what is possible with an assistant, and a few other resources as well. So as we're kind of like packaging up the first 3 to 5 tasks to hand off to an assistant, now it's time to actually go and get the assistant. So in getting the assistant, there's kind of like different approaches that we can take. And, one of them is, I always think of it in terms of actually a table or a graph. And I'm going to put this on the screen here for everyone to see. And if you're listening at home on a podcast and you're not able to see it, then I'll do my best to describe what it is that's on the screen. So you can imagine that there's this XY axis, so kind of like your standard graph. And on the up and down, the Y axis, that's how hard a task is. And at the very bottom, we've got simple tasks. And that could be something as simple as upload this podcast episode to Libsyn, or upload this blog post to WordPress. Like very simple, click here, click there, do this, do that. One step up from that, the next level of difficulty is what's called simple decisions. And a simple decision is something that you could say to your assistant, if it's less than $50, just fix it. Like you don't have to ask me for every time there's a customer service question, you don't have to ask me. If you can do it for $50 less, just take care of it. Then from there, a little harder than that is what's called a hard decision. And a hard decision is actually something like booking a flight. I don't know if you've ever tried to actually sit down and write all the if this, then that of booking a flight, but it's actually quite a complicated decision process, right? Do you want to be flying in the morning, afternoon, or night? Do you care which airline it's with? Do you want to be window or aisle seat? Do you want to be front of the bus, back of the bus, or the plane as it may be? Are you buying with points or are you buying with cash, like with a credit card? Right? And what's more important? Is it more important that we buy with points, or is it more important that we fly at a certain time of day, right? So it's quite complicated. So that's what I would call a hard decision. Then the highest level of all, higher than tasks, higher than simple decisions, higher than hard decisions, is what are called outcomes. And so in the very beginning, I started delegating to Sarah tasks, and then she graduated into simple decisions, then hard decisions. And an outcome example is, last year, we had our annual event in San Diego, and there was a $31,000 budget for all the expenses related to it. All the pins, all the lanyards, renting the room, audio visual, food, flights, like everything that was involved to get our team there and to put on this event was about $31,000. And I said to Sarah, the outcome that I'm looking for is, and I gave her the 360 delegation. And Nicole, not only did Sarah book and run the entire event, she came within 1.6% of the expense budget. Truly amazing. Like amazing. That, right. And that's an example of the compound interest that I've developed with Sarah, because she's been with me for now more than 5 years. At the time, I guess it was 4 years. And how you can continue climbing higher and higher and higher as you have an assistant who takes on more and more and more of the lower end type work. So on the graph that you can see on the screen, and for those of you listening, if you can visualize, we've got the up and down axis, the Y axis, which is tasks at the bottom, and outcomes, which is the hardest at the top. Now going across the x-axis, which is the left and right, we've got tasks, which are how often this task happens. So if your assistant is doing a task, it could be daily, it could be weekly, it could be monthly, or it could be annual. So daily is all the way to the left. Then we've got weekly kind of in the middle. Monthly is more to the right, and all the way to the right are things that happen once a year. And so something that happens on a weekly basis, sometimes a daily basis for us, is invoicing clients and running credit cards and whatnot for folks that want to sign up for Great Assistant. Monthly, something that would happen would be like a monthly report, maybe something to do with financials or something to do with our internal report of how we're doing with all of our clients. And then annual might be something like annual taxes for a company that's doing that once a year. So if you start putting the x-axis with the y-axis, we start seeing there's like a graph that starts to appear. So tasks, if you remember, that's the simplest. Tasks that happen only daily or weekly, you could consider going overseas with that. As we talked about, if it's really simple, rinse, wash, repeat, data entry, photo editing, something like that, then that could be done overseas. Now, whether you go overseas or not, it's a great starting point with your assistant. And as soon as they get that dialed in, then have them graduate into the simple decisions that happen every day or every week. Now, there's a difference between a North American assistant and what I would say is a long-term great assistant, because you can hire a North American assistant for just 5 hours a week. Maybe it's like a 21-year-old person who's part-time college. They're 1 foot in, they're 1 foot out. They're not sure if they want to be an assistant this time next year. They may want to go find themselves by backpacking through Europe. Like, who knows, right? That's a very different person. Even though they're North American, that's a very different person than someone who's expecting to be with you for 3 years and you're expecting to be with them for 3 years. And it's also someone very different than someone who, let's say, has 5 years experience working in corporate America or government America or professional America, who is now just looking to work from home. If we can get that kind of person, someone who maybe has been a project manager for Coca-Cola, or they're a former executive assistant for like Merrill Lynch, or someone who was a paralegal, which is what Sarah was, a paralegal in a busy law office. If we can get someone with that kind of fit and finish, who's coming out of corporate, government, or professional America, they're looking to work from home because they've got kids or they've got elderly parents, or maybe they're just tired of the grind of commuting for an hour and a half into work every day. Maybe they're just so over the office politics of what it means to be in a mega corporation. Maybe they're frustrated that they're not acknowledged in a traditional work setting. Whatever the case may be, that person is like prime time to be a great assistant. And specifically, if they're looking for a long-term position, maybe that they've got kids that are 3 years old and 6 years old, and they want someone, they're looking for a position that allows them to be a parent until their kids are in junior high or middle school, right? That person, combined with you having a long-term vision, totally dials in one of like the most powerful hires you can ever make, which is a powerful right-hand person to be your like executive / personal assistant as needed. So that's kind of the lay of the land as I see it. And something that I discovered, and I'll put this on the screen as well. I can also verbally describe it for those of you listening on the podcast. Maybe, Nicole, maybe you can tell me, have you ever heard of the expression before, good, fast, cheap? You can only ever have 2 of the 3.
Well, I used to have vacation rentals. So yes, I used to say it a lot.
Cool. That's awesome.
You're not going to be in the tourist center if you want this, right? You can be, but you're going to pay a lot. And so, yeah, I'm familiar with this triad.
Yeah. Cool. That's awesome. I think when it became really real for me is the first time that I had like a minor car accident, like a small little collision, just a little fender bender. And I realized that I could get it fixed, and it could be a good fix and a fast fix, but that would require me going to like a really busy, popular auto center that also like a garage that would work overtime and weekends. And you know what that meant? That meant it wasn't coming very cheap, right? So I could get it good and fast, but it couldn't be cheap. Now, if I wanted it to be cheap and I wanted it to be fast, I would have to go to like the dingy on the street corner, very reputable. Like we don't even know if these people are like, just raises a lot of questions. And it could be cheap and it could be fast, but there's a reason that they've got so much availability is because they're not very good. Now, likewise, if I want it to be good and I don't have a lot of money, I want it to be cheap, then I might have to go to my uncle who's a professional mechanic and he already works on cars all day and all night and he can only work on it on the weekends for me, so it's not going to come very fast. So good, fast, cheap, we can oftentimes only have 2 to 3. And I realize that there's a similar phenomenon when it comes to hiring. And it's not good, fast, cheap, but it's talent, pay, and conditions. And so if you want someone who's really skilled, that former corporate America type person I'm talking about, so they're very talented, and if you don't want to pay them $85,000 a year, then you're going to have to be flexible in the working conditions. You're going to need to let them work from home. You're probably going to have to be okay with them not having 9 to 5 availability. Maybe they're not available in the mornings for you, but they're willing to work the afternoons, and they're also willing to work a few hours in the evening or something like that. As soon as you can get flexible on the conditions, you can now get amazing talent at an amazing pay rate. If on the other hand, you're kind of stubborn, you say, well, no, I need someone who's going to be in my office. I need them to be here 9 to 5. I need them to be like on call. If I ever need to ping them or call them, they need to get back to me like within 30 minutes. Well, now that's your conditions. And now you got to sacrifice either talent or pay, and you got to pick. And you probably don't want to sacrifice talent because we don't want like a mediocre assistant, we want a great assistant. So then in that case, you'd be forced to pay a higher pay rate. So that's been like a huge discovery and something that's very unique to where we are right now in this kind of time frame of the working world, is that like corporate America, government America hasn't fully caught on to the power of people working from home. And us as small business owners, we can take advantage of that and get this amazing talent at such an affordable rate. So some of the questions that come up is like, hey, where can I find an assistant? And so, I'll just describe from probably the least successful to the most successful. So the least successful would be to post on Facebook, hey, who knows someone? And not to say it can't work. Some people I'm sure out there have been successful with that. I'm just saying the odds are the worst to just post on Facebook and say, hey, who knows someone? The success rate I've heard is very low on that. A little bit more successful than that is like, hey, going to your neighbor or your relative or your sister-in-law or your spouse. That can be a little bit better because there's like some trust and there's some like investment in each other. However, it's still very, very low success rate and a very low retention rate. A little more successful oftentimes is like an online classified like Craigslist, because now we've got people that want to do business. They're not doing it just because they're your sister-in-law. Next step up from that would be like an online job site like Indeed or Guru or Monster. Now we start going up even further into the done for you. So instead of doing it yourself, you could get it done for you. You could hire a matching service. So there's a lot of recruiting agencies out there. And oftentimes they'll be fairly effective in matching you to a decent person. One of the downsides is all they do is the match. They don't actually teach you how to delegate properly. They don't really sit with you and your assistant to consult with you, kind of a 2-on-1 situation to make sure that your first few tasks are successful. If you want to go all the way to the top, we've got full service. And full service will not only do the match, but they'll also do training for you and your assistant and also provide like consulting coaching real time to make sure that your first few tasks are successful. And oftentimes both the matching service and the full service will have access to pools of assistant that just aren't even available to the general public. So that's kind of like the lay of the land. Now, as far as how to screen, as I mentioned before, I'm going to encourage you, instead of getting just 2 or 3 applicants, push to get 50 to 100 applicants applying. And I also encourage you to expect to invest about 50 to 100 hours. And you might be asking, goodness gracious, what are you doing for 50 to 100 hours that is required to find a great assistant? Well, the first thing that we do, and you're welcome to copy our method if you've got the bandwidth, is we use something called the perfect job posting. So I'll put that up in the various places that we're looking for talent. And I won't give you the whole explanation, but the essence is it's almost like a little mini work test. Because we'll say, if you're interested, apply to us. And in the subject line, it needs to say, first name, last name from city, state, looking or interested in marketing assistant position or whatever the case may be. And by having a very specific prescripted headline, now when people are emailing you in their application, if they don't get the subject line right, like just delete their application. Your executive assistant is someone that you probably want to be pretty good with attention to detail and someone who can also follow instructions. If they can't get the subject line right, it's probably time to move on to someone else, right? So that saves a ton of time, being able to just delete people quickly. So then from there, in your job posting, in the perfect job posting, you also want to ask people to follow a specific format. And the first paragraph, you want them to write it in a red font, 12-point Verdana. And the second paragraph in blue font, 11-point Helvetica. And the third paragraph in Arial, 14-point, right? Black. So then from there, if they've made it past the subject line test, you can now just visually scan their email. You don't actually have to read anything to see if they've done the red font, blue font successfully. If they haven't, guess what? You just delete them. Super simple, right? So the third part that's very interesting is we'll actually tell people don't submit your resume. If you make it to the next step, then we'll ask for it. And so again, as you look at your email inbox, if you see a little paperclip icon, you know they've attached it, just delete them. If you open up the email, you see an attachment at the bottom, just delete them. And that, you'll be astounded how many people can't follow or not willing to or not interested in following even just those basic requests. So then from there, the next step, if someone makes it past that, is we'll put them through some other work tests. And so an example of that would be go into Facebook, create an event, make it a birthday party, put a cool picture up, and invite me, right? And once you've created the event, go into Google Docs and write a process, step by step, what did you do? Then after that, go to loom.com, download Loom, install it to your Chrome, and create a screencast video of how it is that you created this Facebook event. Then from there, send me a single email with 3 links. A link to the Facebook event, a link to the Google Doc, and a link to the Loom video. So that's an example of a work test. And you can see if someone knows how to use technology, and you can see if they're able to follow instructions, and you can see if they're good on camera. You can hear what their voice sounds like. Do they actually speak English? You know what I mean? Like some of these just like very basic questions. So as we conduct a few of those work tests, then it's a good time to get into like some psychometric testing, like personality tests, technology tests, cognitive tests. We have an enterprise software that we use that allows us to compare the results of a person's tests against a pool of 300,000 other assistants. And so we're able to really match up and see how someone stacks up. We also use the Colby Index, which I think is a absolutely essential tool when it comes to hiring. And it's not that expensive. It's $49 per test. And we'll give a Colby test to each of our probably 3 to 5 finalists just to see how they stack up. Then from there, we conduct a first round of amidst all of this, we can conduct an interview or 2 just to assess personality. And then finally, that's kind of the first 99% of it is then we get into like the final interview. And so if someone's looking to do all this on their own, it's about 50 to 100 hours. If someone were to ever hire us, we would do the first 99% for you. And then you would just make that last determination of these 3 finalists, which one fits best for you. So in summary, that's the 3 steps is vision, delegation, and hiring. And if a person takes this approach, their success rate will easily go up from, 30, 40% chance of success to maybe 40, 50, 60, 70. If you do this a lot, obviously it can go even higher than that. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense. And I really appreciate you breaking down your system. I've learned a ton and I've been the recipient of that because I am a client and you guys have provided me with multiple assistants and, excuse me. Yeah. I mean, I'm not embarrassed by how many times I did it wrong, but there's been a lot. It's been a lot. And every time I would think, okay, yay, I've got somebody and they're trained up, something would happen. And it's like, okay, nope, starting over. And there were just so many gold nuggets there that had I known 3 years ago, I think my experience in hiring would have been very different. But I'm really glad to have found you guys, and I fully endorse you. I talk to anybody who's talking to me about, they're looking to hire. And what I find is, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, excuse me, but you use the word assistant. And I think sometimes we think, okay, I don't really need an assistant. I need a specialist to do this. But not necessarily. At least this is what I've had conversations with people where they're like, I need, an operations person. And I'm like, oh yeah, cool. Like for what? Well, I need them to do this. I need them to do this. It's like, but you know what you want to have done. It's not like you need somebody with that, in the case I'm thinking of, it's like, do you really need somebody who's at that surgeon level? I love that analogy that you used. And the case, oftentimes when I'm talking with people, it's no. They're not really looking for the surgeon. They're still the surgeon, but they're looking for an assistant that is like they don't know exists, because they don't realize there are those high-level assistants that can be delegated things that they've already done the high level strategy and so on for. So I think it's really, it's amazing the service that you guys offer and the quality of people that you find and the willingness of your team to support your clients very holistically. And when I say your clients, I also consider the assistants your clients, because even though the entrepreneur is the one paying, you guys treat your assistants like gold and get them so prepared. And if they don't like the fit, you'll find them a new placement too. So it has to be like a win-win-win. And so I know this masterclass isn't like a promotion for Great Assistant, but we're having you on another episode to do that on a resource share. But I just feel like if any of my listeners have been listening to this session and going, oh my gosh, this is for me. I don't want to do any of that. I do personally endorse you guys and would encourage people to reach out. So, yeah, thanks.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. I know I got my first assistant too early, actually. And so timing is a big deal. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of assistants that we help place with entrepreneurs, and that entrepreneur probably should have gotten an assistant 6 months ago. So some entrepreneurs, it's too early. Some it's like long overdue. And I think I think timing is a big question. And I think the other is actually like, how do we make an assistant profitable? Mm-hmm. And so being able to just see what it is that's going on in our businesses, kind of zoom out for a minute and take a look. I think that's the other big question to me. And so if anyone's interested in knowing more, they can go to greatassistant.com/apply. You'll end up talking to someone from our team. It might be me, it might be someone else from our team. And we can walk you through a couple of those core questions, like, is now the right time? And are you in a position to make an assistant profitable or not? And whether it is or whether it isn't, we're happy to just help and help you skip a lot of the dumb tax that I've paid and a lot of the heartache that I've experienced. And you know what? Like, no one's 100% at hiring. That's not a realistic goal. But if we can help you get a little closer, we're not even 100% at hiring. And if it doesn't work, then we find replacement assistants. But if we can just get a little better, a little closer, explore it, I think it's about progress, not perfection.
Amazing. And you also mentioned resources before. That's at greatassistant.com/toolbox. Awesome. Well, Tim, thank you so much. It was a pleasure, and always a pleasure. And I look forward to our next interview as well.
Thank you so much.